Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for coming to a peek into Brody's work and into what Brody's been doing. For those of you who have been part of Brody Online for any one or multiple of the classes, you know how exciting the program has been and how creative the community has been, and learning from each other. The work has been astounding, truly, and it's been a lot of fun. So first of all, if you're not enrolled, coming up, of course, beginning in March and April, we have Brody's collage technique, which we'll be showing some of tonight. And in May and June, Brody's kozo technique. So we're very excited. Of course, in September and October, metal and glass. In November and December, shaping your story, not unlike what we just did the last 4 months, but 2 months, broadsides. And students will several broadsides. So just to give you a little quick vision into what's coming, please, by all means, check the Brody Online platform for information. Also, the first year of Brody Online, 2021, the recordings are available for purchase now, March, April, May, and June. And from that first year, 2021, September, October, November, and December will be going up for sale in the beginning of March. So it's just coming up in just a few weeks. So Brody, with that, there is so much to do and so much work to see. And I can't wait. Let's go. We're yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your charming introduction, Karen, and for your bravery in being with us this evening with a rather heavy cold. You don't sound like it anymore. It seems you've perked up really wonderfully.
And I forgot something really important. Please, by all, put your questions in the chat.
Yeah. We'll try to answer everything you send in the chat this evening. We'll do our best. Okay, I have to sit down in order to start my little PowerPoint here first. So it's an open portfolio, as you know, this evening, and it's going to be, I've called it here, subtitle, some thoughts on what it means to be a calligrapher. But the truth is, if I go into all of that, I'll sound like an agony ant, and I'll just go on and on and on about the art craft thing, the living as an artist thing. You don't want to hear that this evening. You want to see some work and just talk about that. So we're not actually in my studio this evening. So here's a couple of photos of it. The reason is because my studio is too big to heat in a time when gas prices have gone through the roof. And so here's just a couple of photos of my studio. It looks like anybody else's. You can see a lot of work piled up. And of course, there's this one little thing that needs to be dealt with, and that is a slip of a key in the advertisement at the beginning. So it is definitely a peek, not a peak and not a pig this evening that we're going to be having at my work. Right. So my portfolio is actually many drawers in a plan chest and a cardboard portfolio as well. And it's getting to where you can't slide it under the bed. I just have dozens, if not hundreds of pieces. And I've made a choice this evening, which I hope is a little bit representative, but only of the last few years. And the odd thing, and I didn't really realize it until quite recently, was that the tendency over 20 and more years of work has been from the collages, which will be the end of tonight's presentation, towards the works on paper without the collage background. So this is I'm going to start with a couple in black and white, and I can zoom in. I believe I'm going to manage to do that pretty well. Yes, there we go. To show you that one aspect of the work on paper, which makes it quite different to the collages, is that the paper has tended to push me towards calligraphic experimentation. So this is written with a comb pen, and we did that in Brody Online at the end of 2021. That's one of the courses that will be going up as a recorded course in March. Will be available from, I guess, about the 10th of March, something like that. And I work on sheets of Reeves paper, and for many years, 25 years or more, I've tended to work on full sheets, which are 105 centimeters wide and 75, well, 105 by 75. So it's a fairly big sheet, and I've become very comfortable with that size of paper, or even larger, but not so comfortable with things smaller than that. So I've kept the things, everything in this portfolio is pretty representative in the sense that I've worked on this size for years and years. I'm very happy with it, and I would go larger if I knew where to put it afterwards. So a piece like this begins completely spontaneously. I choose a pen. In this case, I just decided to pick up a comb pen. I don't even have a text in front of me. Those of you who have been with me on Brody Online and Shaping Your Story especially know that I'm a big fan of simply starting to write the first word that comes into my head. And by the time that word is about finished, the next word and maybe the sentence is starting to shape itself. And I just go with that. And as I do that, the composition or lack of composition, because this is, as you can see here, it's just a very simple block of text, but I do have the bottom edge of the paper to think about. And so at a certain point, I have to sort of decide to round off my text and finish it here with a little bit of a line left over for a nice white space to echo the white space at the top of the page. Now, this is a sort of wrong letter concept in that every time I return to a letter, I'm going to try to make it different to the time before and different to all the other letters. So there shouldn't be any two A's or E's or I's or O's are used the same in a composition like this, but they should all be recognizable. And that sort of calligraphic experimentation I find is encouraged on the plain white Reeves paper. The collages have a slightly different effect on my work, as we'll see later on. Here's another work that's, I'm just going to show you two black and white or gray and white pieces tonight. This will show another aspect of it, which is I don't know where I'm going to start and I don't know where I'm going to finish. Somehow I started to write here in this direction, and then I turned the sheet around and continued to fill it from the other direction. But no decisions are made beforehand, except which tool am I going to pick up, essentially, and which ink am I going to dip it in. In this case, I decided to dip it in a very watery ink instead of a black ink, and then later add some accents in darker gray, but nothing really completely black on this page. So let me just zoom out. I'll actually show you the whole sheet here. I need to remember to do that, zooming in and zooming out. And you can see, so here's the dividing line, legible from this side, legible from that side, and playing with moving from cursive scripts, brush scripts to capital letters, and just everything in between, really. So those are the two black and white that I'll show you. I'm going to turn these over each time so that we have a white background when I show you the next page. This is a way of working that actually goes a long way back for me, but came out in color just last summer when I was working in Italy in my studio there, the studio that I share with Amity, who I believe is with us this evening. This is a sort of experiment in writing basically vertically, stacking the letters vertically, and I moved into the idea of switching from pen to brush and switching from direction and switching color as I did this page, but sort of moving out across the surface in a free and unpredictable way. It's really a form of play, this is, but it's based very much on exercises I've done over the years by studying Japanese calligraphy, which, written in a vertical direction, and wondering, well, how could that be adapted to our Latin alphabet? I have several of my, I call them either yellow submarine letters or fat and juicy letters. Both names will do. You can call them wrong letters too, if you like. The wrong letter concept for me basically means when you make a letter, you have to make it not normally. You have to do something to it that the rules of formal script as we know them doesn't allow. And so you have to break those rules with every single letter. This is a script that started to take shape, 5 or 6 years ago, I suppose. I don't know if it's a script or it's an attitude, really, with a pointed brush. And let me zoom in. What you're seeing, I believe you're seeing the shadows of the light fixture here. You can see it's actually very precise work. Forgive the slight wobble of the camera as I touch it. Very, very precise work, but it's all completely spontaneous. There's no planning. There's no text in advance. The first word that comes into my head, off I go, and the composition is also spontaneously created. They usually work out because it's actually a very slow process. So I have the chance to move forward in reasonable steps and avoid making some mistake in the composition. But because it's so slow, I do sometimes make mistakes in the spelling. I think whenever you go that slow and are thinking only the shape of the letter, you can leave a letter out or put it in twice or something like that. So that's the, let's go back out to the whole sheet. That's my.
And Brody, if you could please tap hide. Thank you.
Oh, am I going to have to do that each time?
If you touch your screen, yes.
Okay, okay.
I wish all
do that by itself.
I wish you could all see the setup of Brody on a ladder.
Yeah. Well, because the phone has to be quite high off the surface to get these big sheets in. So I have this really rather elaborate setup here. I won't zoom any more than I need to in that case. I'm just going to show you a couple more of the, sometimes, again, no compositional decision, just make a rectangle. But then what interests me here is not just the play of color, which I do enjoy very much, but how one letter responds to another. So I, F. The F is definitely made to relate to the shape that the eye, the white shape that the eye creates on its right edge. If you can see this this Y here, which will also make the top of the E in the next line. I don't know that yet, but it will happen. O, U, T, A, K, E. If you take the long view, yeah, that's this text, is if you take the long view. So there's sometimes little slightly philosophical statements. I better speed right along through my portfolio, and we won't get to the end. Show you another wrong letter composition, which is upside down. Excuse me. This is the right way up for it. Changing from the yellow ochres to the blue greens as it goes down. I really, really, really enjoy this process of playing spontaneously with the colors and keeping them related to each other, looking for the tertiary colors, the wonderful rich gray, green, purples that you get when you mix gouache colors that settle on the Reeves paper at different rates. And one last wrong letter composition here. Or fat and juicy, I suppose. We have to decide on what the name of this is. This script.
Brody, can you talk about the fluid you use in your wrong letters?
Yes, well, those that I just showed you are gouache colors. I'm pretty much standard gouache. Gouache, quite diluted, works beautifully on Reeves paper. Reeves will behave like a watercolor paper, but it has a softer surface, so it's even a little more generous maybe with the taking up of color. It doesn't bleed with gouache, but it'll take a nice watery color, let it settle in a beautiful way. I've moved on for a piece like this one now. I'll use golden liquid acrylics as well for the translucent, rich, strong colors. But you know, if there's gouache sitting next to me and I need that color, I'll just dip in and mix them all. So you don't really come to me for precise and well-defined technical statements. I'm very much the man of convenience in my studio. What's to hand I use. If there's certain rich colors I want, like the quinacridones in the golden acrylics, I like to use those very much. It's a pity they're the most expensive. And a piece like this, we usually will start, because I have made a number of these with a simple statement, and I think you can probably read it. Level of frustration, 8. And then I laugh because I didn't know I was going to write that. And how did I decide that my level of frustration was 8 on that day? But then the nice thing is that actually this frustration, up to here, it's trust, level of trust, 8. So there's a sort of double meaning in this piece. And it would start out just me putting it down in black, thinking, okay, today I'm going to do a minimalist, Barbara Kruger. No, that's not who I mean. One of the other conceptual artists. Jessica Diamond, I think is the one I mean. Very simple minimalist statement, black on white, funny text, and that's going to be it. And then I look at it after that and I think, no, need color, want to play with color. And so it winds up going from a simple legible text to this more colorful swirling composition that you see, where legibility is not, in fact, your first experience. And you see the backs, this is a dragonfly wing. The backs are sometimes showing things that have not succeeded. And then every now and then it just goes completely wild, but it's almost always the case that even this started as words. So I rarely work just from the impulse to make a mark, and almost never from the impulse to draw something from the visual world, from nature, plant, to tree. That can happen, but it's almost always writing for me. It's almost always related to text and thoughts, putting my thoughts down, sorting them out, or actually putting my thoughts down and then letting them run where they want to. That's
Brody, can you talk about the tool you used in that last piece?
This is just a brush. Oh, wait, no, it's several tools. This is, now I've turned it the other way. Do we like it better this way? No, we don't. This is large flat brushes, probably not in a very good condition anymore. You can see here, these fine lines will be the Brody pen, which is a great monoline drawing tool if you use it for on its point, and you can turn it on its edges to make these sort of scratchy, wider marks there. It has two edges, a smaller and a larger one. You can use both. So, and then every now and then just using the Brody pen to make drawn letters or things that sort of look like letters. In this case, I can now see that I had done an E and there's two more next to it, as if I'm re-identifying it or putting a label on the original E. In one like this, the text is lost. It was one, but a few days later, I won't remember what it was. So these are golden liquid acrylics, a little bit of gouache, some bisters, and then a couple of brushes, big and small, and then my own pen. Just checking to make sure we're doing all right for time. Now these are, properly speaking, wrong letters. This was how I came up with that idea. And I'm going to go ahead. I know I'm going to have to stand back up on the chair and, okay, let me just zoom in, and then I'm going to have to do hide again. There we go. Okay. One of my favorite tools has always been the automatic pen, and not the narrow ones. I like the ones that are from a ½ inch on, maybe nearly 2 centimeters wide and on. I think for the smaller end, I don't like the automatic pen so much as I like the widest speedball or even the edge of my pen. But for a fairly wide pen, I think the automatic pen has so many advantages because it gives you, it starts with this kind of rather rigid quality of mark. You don't have to use it that way, but its natural tendency is to make these rather boxy shapes. But also, you can draw really well with the corner of an automatic pen. And I really like to take advantage of that to produce the finer lines or to outline shapes that won't then have, let me just show you what I mean here, if I can find my finger. This T, for example, would be hard with twisting to make that shape with the automatic pen fully flat on the paper and then twist it. But you can easily draw that and flood it with the automatic pen. And the same with this H here. You can see how that's a drawn element, a little drawn serif. So it's a combination of drawing with the corner and filling in and using the full width of the pen, and then sometimes adjusting that. And this again is the game of never make the letter quite right, do something odd to it. And at the very first letter sort of broke the rule, but maybe I hadn't decided yet on that. But the next one, the N here, oh, you can't see that. I'm gonna have to move this so you can see that. At the very beginning, you see it's a rather normal I. It is a normal I, it's just fact. The N then has broken 2 rules. That's enough to make it wrong. And then it has 2 different kinds of serifs. One has this wedge serif, which is the pen on its side being pulled over. The other is this swooshy serif, which has been drawn by the corner. The M has two different legs and doesn't dip down very far, and so on. As you go down, you'll find each letter has been, in one way or another, slightly manipulated to not be the standard. And that's the game I like to play in order to keep the whole process alive for myself. And I find that what it also does is it means each letter is in response to the previous letter. And then when you get to the second line, it's in response to the line above. So you always have shapes that you can respond to create new shapes, and the result being a more interesting black-white relationship than just formal writing. And also in this case, I started to fill in all of the background with black afterwards. And it was wonderful. It took forever. And since I tend to do things quickly, and I tend to be a little bit I rush things a little. So I've always looked for ways to slow down. And this is marvelous. With the finest pointed sable brush, filling in the black spaces after the letter has been written, it allows me to carve the letter just a little bit more into the shape I want. And I was going to do the whole sheet like this, but just then my wife came into the studio and said, "Stop now. It's fine now." Let me just show you. I'm going to go back out, and then I'm going to have to do the hide thing, right? Oh, no, it didn't come back. Okay. Right. And so here's the whole sheet. Yes?
We have the usual question, the usual technical question of fluid, especially the lovely variated color in your letter.
Yeah. Well, that is pure and simple yellow ochre gouache, which is a rough grain pigment. So it's a large grain pigment, which means that as you use the automatic pen, you tend to drag it around on the surface a little bit. It's nearly impossible to get a clean, even covering using something like the ochre or an ultramarine blue. They'll drag and they won't settle smoothly, which I love in that case. The background black is the Tollin's Intense Black, which is the blackest black you can get. And so it's a nice contrast, the absolutely matte black with the sort of watery yellow ochre layer. Now, moving on to full color sheets, I do sometimes experiment with coloring a sheet before writing. And in this case, I had done an exhibition, an installation in which a whole bunch of, meters and meters of a kind of tracing paper had to be dipped in vats of blue to completely make a structure that was lit in very blue glowing structure. So I had some of that left over, and I used that to paint some of my reeves, which made it a very nice surface to write on. So this was, let me zoom in again and let's see what we get. Okay, it doesn't always say, the info doesn't always come back. You can see it's just a simple cursive with some exaggerated features. It's written with a, what do you call day glow? I forget the name. Karen, help me. Besides day glow. Fluorescent is the word. Fluorescent gouache, which covers very well. And I absolutely love the electric quality of this orange, this glowing orange on the blue. It's like op art. It sort of vibrates, makes your eyes vibrate, makes them unsure where to focus. And I've always been interested in that aspect of color relationships. And in this case, it's a spontaneous text, but since it's basically handwriting, this would be my thoughts of the day. This is a diary entry, and it wouldn't be a bad thing for me to actually do one of these every day. It takes 45 minutes to write it, something like that. Prepare a stack of different colored papers, and every day do my diary in this way. It's worth considering.
Brody, was that painted, the background, or was it dyed?
Yeah, painted. Definitely painted with a very broad brush. You can just see the broad brush strokes. And left, so you can see, I do it on a board and I just leave it there to dry. So you can see the back is also a little bit, got a little bit of blue on it. Okay. I hope that refocusing isn't making you all dizzy.
No, we're doing.
Okay, now this is the first time we're going to see collage this evening.
And I'm going to ask you to zoom out, please.
Yeah, I'm going to zoom out a little bit more.
Thank you.
Go. Okay, so this is a full sheet of Reeves, which has been, when I'm doing a collage, as all of you know from doing watercolor and all, you stretch the piece on a board before you begin, so that you damp the paper and stretch it, so that whenever you apply a lot of moisture to your paper and let it dry, it'll dry flat. And you can do that in as many stages as you like. We're going to be doing that in the collage class. So this has been a sheet of Reeves, damped and stretched, and you can just see the gum strip through the two layers of Kozo paper. In this case, I've written on the Kozo paper separately. And then when it's dry, I cut pieces of it and collage them in layers onto the background. And it's nice, it gives a wonderful ivory color to the white areas of the page, which I really appreciate. And you can also see the layers of writing one on top of the other. Now, this again would be a text, no longer possible to read it, but I would have started with a 10-meter roll of Kozo paper, put the first roll, unrolled it onto my desk, started writing the 3 columns next to each other, rolled a bit more, continued writing the 3 columns, and I did the entire 10 meters that way, which was a great deal of fun in itself. And then I decided afterwards to cut it and collage it in layers like this. Okay, now that was we've seen a full color sheet. I want to turn over 2 at once here. Yes, that's the one we want. So as you can see on the back of this one, there's something else that I didn't like. So I used that to make a sketch. And this is at this point when a lot of the young calligraphy people were doing those things in circles. And they're still doing things in circles. So I thought, well, I'm going to do something in a circle just to show them that just because I'm way older than they are doesn't mean I can't do something in a circle. And the sketch was here. So this I still find it amazing, but I know it's true that I did that in just a couple of hours or so. And then I decided to convert that to high precision work. Once again, part of that idea of slowing down, spending more time on a piece. And so, whereas this one took maybe a couple of hours, 3 hours, something like that, this one took at least 3 solid weeks, if not more, of the most precise work, because all the calligraphy was written and then all the background was filled in afterwards. And of course, here's the question. Which do we like more? And I'm fairly certain, at least my choice is the one with the spontaneity, the action, the brush marks. This one it may impress for technique, but this one has the schwung, you know. So it's fascinating to see, to me, that although I still like looking at this one here, the precise one, and I can imagine finding the carpet weaver in Isfahan to weave this for me, I still tend towards this one because of the feeling and the spontaneity that you see in the marks.
Yes. That's
I
also,
did have fun doing the precise work.
that's also the consensus in the chat, by the way.
I'm not at all surprised. So that just goes to show technique isn't everything, right? Now, sometimes they just don't work. Well, it depends on how you define doesn't work. But I see this as it's actually signed. So at a certain point, I must have thought it was working all right. There it is. Certainly suggests a very dark mood. And so I will tend to keep these around. I mean, they don't get torn up and thrown away because it's a wonderful piece of Reeves. So I can still convert this into a collage where nothing of this would be seen, or I can think about it and decide, you know, how to approach it to change it into something that I might like more than what I see now. So that process of changing my mind is going on all the time. And it's exhausting. Here's one that did work, I believe. I'd be fairly happy to say that. And here you can still see that the text is there. I think it would be rather hard to decipher the text, but you can see that writing is the main thing going on here, and then the filling in of certain spaces in the background afterwards. I'm using let me zoom in because you can see what happens when you mix gouaches and inks, and especially if the inks have been sitting open in the inkwell for a long time, they will have tended to sort of half dry and granulate in the open inkwell, and then they'll react in a really interesting way with the gouaches. If you make a wet stroke and then partially fill it with the second color, you can get some really beautiful effects that way.
Brody, a couple of pieces ago, you said that you thought something was not successful. How do you repurpose that later?
Okay, let's go back to it. I believe it was the gloomy one, right? Okay, so here's a repurposed one. That one, I was playing in this. I was playing with bisters and spirit-based. There's a turpentine or spirit-based colors which would reject each other. And I got some interesting pieces out of that process, but this wasn't one of them. So that became the sketch here on the other side. So I just used the other side. I didn't think I could do anything to make this one work. Now, this one, on the other hand, you know, when I compare these two now, it's interesting. And I suppose you probably all have this experience that your opinion of your work changes as time goes by. Something that you didn't like very much, you may like later, especially if you dig it out and you don't realize you forget that you did it. So you turn your critical filters off a little bit and you just accept it for what it is. Suddenly I'm liking this a bit more, I think. And I think, again, in the calligraphy world, we might have the tendency to then put those neat golden caps over it or something. You know, that just would be the thing we would do in our world, would be to go right across here with that precise, legible, often ingredient, which we would then consider to be the sort of, well, I'm going to say finishing touch, but I think we see it often more in terms of the thing that gives the background chaos meaning, and as it were shows I can do more than make a background mess. And I'm really trying to resist that impulse very much, to say I need to prove I'm a craftsperson as well as an artist. I need to show that other side, the intentional side, the directed side, the well-crafted side, and which in a way is a sort of a masking of this impulse here. And so I know that if I were to go to my gallery, they would find this quite interesting instead of some of the more aesthetically finished work, because that sort of energy, that kind of what seems here to be unfiltered and gutsy, would correspond to the kinds of emotions that they would be looking for in a work of art.
Well, Brody,
does that make sense?
Yeah, and there's a question in the chat that kind of speaks to that. If you could please elaborate on your use of chance in your more expressive processes.
Oh gosh, yes. Well, too much. It seems it's either I'm either at I'm either the craftsman or the unruly, you know, way past midlife crisis adolescent kind of impulse that just picks it up and splashes it around, but naturally on top of 40 years of, you know, being a craftsman. So that means complete freedom from the discipline isn't really available without, you know, certainly illegal substances, I suspect. And for a while I regretted that. And I know that there is in the arts teaching system, certainly in Belgium, but I know that it goes further than that. They are very worried about teaching the craft aspect of an art to a young artist, because they think that's going to limit them. They think they should find those things out for themselves, and what they need to look for is that inner force, the inner id that is the source of creation. You know, you can talk about that a lot, whether that's really what happens. Certainly not what always happens. Is that what Jan van Eyck did? Is it what Rubens did? But it's very much what we think of Pollock as doing, having done. And so that's an interesting debate to be had. But for me, it really is a matter of picking up a tool, dipping it into color. I don't stop to feel an emotion. It just happens. And that doesn't help any of you, except that I think the most important thing is that I just don't care. I'm not worried about it. Or I start worried and then I realize it's a mess. Then you stop worrying and you've lost it. So then you just go. You go, maybe you go angrily, or you go enthusiastically, or you just go carelessly. But certainly it becomes an impulse. And then you see the back. Look at that. That's actually quite interesting. You know, there's Japanese. Very minimalist.
Thank you, Brody.
Okay, that's a big discussion, but pile here is we're not even halfway through. We need to keep going. So let me just, I'm going to zoom a bit through things. This is another one of those highly precise, write it with the automatic pen, and then fill in the background with the pointed sable brush. Enjoy every minute of it. Totally spontaneous, even though the precision wouldn't make you think that's the case. But it is. Nothing is pre-planned in this. The only thing is, I saw some Islamic tile work and I think, God, I love that stuff. How can I be inspired by that? And we should, oh yes, now we finally get to collage. Right. So now I'm going to start the collage with this. I can zoom out just a little bit more to show you the whole piece. Yes, there we go. This is not an early collage, but since it's the purest of the ones that I still have to show you, I thought I'd go ahead and talk about it collaged from this piece on. And this basically, I know a number of people who are book restorers, and one of them gave me, as she's restoring books, she's taking out end pages and taking apart old bindings and finding stuff inside the bindings and winding up with a big box of random bits of very old papers, which she simply gave me. And I adored all the colors of these papers. So I thought I'm going to make a whole collage just of the bits that she has collected over the years, and then I'll write something on it. But as you can see, let me just zoom in on it, because why would you ever write on that? If one word came in, Bellerophon, figure from mythology, and a little bit of a very ancient document here. It looks like it's about 16th, maybe 17th century here. And the papers are anything from 400 to 300 to 200 years old. And they are so wonderful in themselves that the whole story is told just that way. And so to me, that's finished. And it's the collage technique. In that sense, there's nothing to collage. You put the paste on and you glue it down. But we will look at that in detail in the collage course next month, because which paste, what's a good archival paste, which pastes will not show as glossy things if you get them on the front of your paper, which ones are sympathetic to the old paper so that they glue out nice and smooth, which do not pull so that when your collage is finished, it doesn't curl up. So you can see that this is staying nice and flat. We'll talk about all those things, but that was really, as it were, pure conceptual collage. This one too, it's upside down. I've learned how to color very thin Chinese rice papers using Bistre inks, other colors. And Amity has taken that process really to a very high level. And sometimes I make a collage just using those colored papers. And I find, again, that's enough. I wouldn't even begin to know how to add anything to this, certainly not writing, because the whole thing that's going on here is this wonderful dialogue between one blue and another blue. And I don't need to interrupt that conversation. And here's the collage. This is the first one that goes beyond just pasting that I want to show you. And I knew that you weren't going to see much here. It's minimalist, all right? So the thing that's going on here is that you'll see now, each of these is, so it's a piece of Reeves paper, as always, stretched on a board. Each of these is a page of an old book. And I didn't know where I was going with this idea, but the whole thing is gridded, covered with this grid of old pages, all from the same book. And then I quite simply masked off and whitewashed away the text on each page, not very neatly, so that you have little margins of text here and there. And again, my idea here was probably to write something on it, but I liked it so much as it was that I just left it like this. And I do think if you look at, let me just go back. So in the previous piece, we had this dialogue of blue with blue, and here we have the dialogue of white with off-white, or we have the dialogue with annihilated text with blank paper. So all of that I find really quite interesting as a way of interpreting the piece. Collages will be getting a little more elaborate. I have a little thing I need to get here, because in this case, my whitewash is a very important thing. Okay, I have to zoom in so you can see this. I've got a flashlight to help you see it. I'll use my whitewash, there you go, to create textures like that on the surface. So only in a certain light will you be able to see the text. Get rid of there to hide again. Hit me.
It's wonderful, Brody. And if you could tap hide again, please.
Adjust it. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So this is a collage which has, as you can see, layers of old books and rice paper with writing in between the layers along the edges here. Hold on, I never know where to point. The edges here, and you can see the old text is just visible through the layers of rice paper. There's an old document at the top, and then this texture which I create I'll be showing you how I do this in the collage course. And it's really a wonderful, flexible way of working white and white, or there's ways of doing color. I'll show you that in a moment too. But certainly a way of bringing relief into the collage. Okay, put that away. Oh my goodness, the pile is still so big. Sometimes the collage is simple. It functions only as a background or a surface or a wall. I don't like the word background in the sense that you may think, oh, just decorate the background and then write on it. That's not really what's happening. I'm creating a context or a place for the calligraphy to live. Sometimes the white paper, left white, is the place where the calligraphy lives, and that allows the calligraphy to be, as it were, in an abstract, unreal realm, hovering, floating. The paper, in a certain sense, disappears and the letters float forward. In this aspect or approach to collage, I still call this collage because there's a gluing of rice papers and all going on here. This surface winds up a wonderful, wonderful texture. To me, it's a wall. It's an old wall, an Italian wall, something like that, with this then very, as it were, sharply written calligraphy on top. So it gives a different place for the calligraphy to live. And that's been really something, that's what's driven my, oh no, oh dear, just a minute. That's driven my collage process for a very long time. This idea that I want to investigate new surfaces for the calligraphy to live on, or in that way, new contexts, new places for the writing to live. So let me just go through a few of those, which have that rough whitewash background, which is not easy to write on. And that gives me the advantage of allowing me to just give up the idea of controlling the writing too much. Allowing me to struggle on the surface means that I have to listen to it. I have to sort of make the kind of mark that it is interested in carrying instead of what I want to impose on it.
And Brody, this is the course you'll be teaching in March and April.
Right. That's right. This is the one. This is this is in fact, this piece was a demo I did in one of my collage workshops, totally done in, every step shown to the students, the writing put on the final stage, and this graffito work done in the background also. So this is a it's a way for me to not just have that painted background, but to take the piece of paper and transform it into something that's more monumental, more architectural, more like a wall, more like a solid, really. And then I usually frame them in such a way that you can see the edge that's been cut as I lifted it off the board. So this piece of wall, it's like a piece of the Berlin Wall almost, that's been lifted and put in another context. This was another demonstration in a course, I remember. And it's funny because I can read a bit here. I had I had not broken my arm, but pulled a tendon. So I wasn't able to do my sport. And I'm just kvetching about that right here. But this was done with my arm in a cast and an automatic pen. And let's see, they can get quite rich in their textures. What you're seeing here, we've seen it before this evening, the rectangles of the book pages, whitewashed. Oh, you can't. Yes, you can just see that. Whitewashing out the text, or not whitewashing out the text, or just a little bit, or covering the text with a rectangle of graphite powder, which I simply buy loose in a jar, and then I mix it with acrylic medium. Wonderful thing to paint with, and you can polish it. And then at the bottom, overlapping the pages, and I'll show you that too, because this is collage respecting certain, I don't know what to call it, the integrity of the sheet of paper in a sense. Can you see these are all the pages of an accounting book overlapping? And when the whitewash goes on and gets sanded away, the overlapping comes out. And so a natural rectangular rhythm of interlocking rhythm, rectangles, is the result of that process. And then on top of that, some of my wrong letters done, in this case, very, very precisely using a pointed brush. And you can see it says, it all has a place, CE, in the, going in the other direction, book. All has a place in the book. Okay. Now we move on to another thing that interests me very much. I'm glad we're in tight focus here. I can zoom out in a moment. And that is the sgraffito, so the scratching into my surface, and the stamping of letters. And the stamping of letters, that really brings me to something that's been, for me, very important in my collage work, in my work in general, as I've agonized over what does it mean to be a calligrapher, and what is the relationship of that to being an artist. I don't have an answer for you here, but I've talked in my online classes about this problem and what kind of letters contemporary artists have used over the last 100 years or so, and why did they use those letters instead of calligraphic letters, and so on. And these stamped letters that you see here, they're metal stamps, and they're punched into the whitewash background, and they give me the chance to do two things. One is to have that mechanical, hard, unfeeling typographic letter, which is what most letters in our day and age are anyway. And since they're stamped by hand, they have a sort of irregular feeling to them anyway, because I'm not drawing neat lines. I'm just stamping them and not holding a good line of writing. But that gives them a certain life and a certain kind of post-industrial steampunk feeling to them. But it also gives me legibility. So they're highly legible, being typographic. And they have one more quality which I really like. And that is that because of picking up the individual letters and stamping it and putting it back and taking the next letter, you get into a totally different rhythm of text creation. And we'll be looking at that because these backgrounds that I make, they turn out to be not the background, but the whole piece in the end. They wind up being poems. So it says 8 times, I think, your feelings, my emotions, our feelings, our emotions, my, and then feelings is X'd out, your emotions, their feelings, your priorities, our compromise, my priorities, your questions, their X'd out, our feelings, your compromise. So it's all about that kind of thing. And this is something that happens to me in this process of stamping the letters. Okay, we'll see a couple more like that. Let's see what we've got here. Yes, here's one in that series again, but instead of stamped letters here, I have a collage of old book pages where every line of this just takes forever to do. Every line of text is covered by a bit of paper cut from another page. So it's all been blanked out with little strips of paper, hundreds of little strips of paper, creating a new kind of texture, which looks like a text, but which, when you look a little closer, you start to think it looks like Chinese characters. And then, then it seems to be like code. And at the bottom, the whitewash is shown there without the collage on top. And this is sgraffito work, which is cut into the surface with a knife. Any questions coming in there, Karen?
There are a couple of questions that will come at the end, not about.
Well, we're getting closer. Here's a true collage with. Let's see if I can get it all. There we go. Yeah. This has the whitewash element, has the old book page element, different languages. We're going to be talking about sourcing old book pages in different scripts. Here we have Japanese and some early 19th century beautiful copperplate elements here. I tend to cut a lot of things up. I suppose you could say stop doing that, ruining all those nice old things, but what else is going to happen to them? And then this text that you see in the background here as well. So that means that these pieces, well, let me go back to that. They have several levels. They have as it were, the background text, which is legible in typography. They have these other elements which have text in them. You can read this if your French is all right, or your Japanese is all right. And these little things, which are circles cut out of old books here, which I suppose you could also read. And then this very forceful calligraphy in the foreground, which you can't read anymore. So you have several levels of information. It all seems to be writing, but there's not all of it's accessible to us. So these typographic letters are accessible, and the book pages in French are accessible to me, the Japanese not. So you're getting all this information, but you can't do very much with some of it. And so they have a very unusual relationship to each other. And that's something that fascinates me, the different levels of intelligibility, is that right? And vagueness, and the relationship between different languages and things written in different times. Here, sometimes this is a joke. It's a piece I enjoy very much. I've had in my sketchbooks, I collect words, phrases, write things down that I just find an interesting sounding phrase, or a phrase with an interesting meaning. And then I don't know what I'm going to do with it. And then I flip through my notebooks when I'm looking for words sometimes. And I found the words faux zen, and they made me laugh. So here they are, cut out of lead and gilded and placed on the surface. I think a Zen master would know just what I need. Here you can see the whole network, not the stamped letters here, but stenciled typographic letters, which are very legible, very free cola pen cursive in layers. So writing it, putting rice paper on top of it, writing again, another layer of rice paper, writing again, and then adding the typography. So many layers. It symbolizes to me the complexity of what goes on in our heads all the time. The chatter, the focus, the lack of focus, somebody talking to you, your phone going off. There's always another wave of information trying to get into you from the outside or trying to come up from the inside. And it's very hard for us, all of us, I think, to know what to do with all that information. And so information and how we perceive it has really been one of the core meanings that I've worked with in my collages. Here we see an old book cover at the bottom, abstract writing on the old book pages, and then this red line, which seems to come out like a laser out of this book that has been negated or destroyed. Now you see the back of that one, turn into the front of this one. Every now and then something from nature, a still life, a vase of flowers, stamp letters in the background. And this one turned into quite an interesting text. And what happens with my stamps, because I'm picking up a certain letter, it's quite efficient to, if I have the Y and I've decided to write the word or stamp the word U, to take the Y and go Y, 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 O, 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 U, 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 U. So I have 10 times the word U. And then the next letter, word, remember, every, remember, half, remember nothing. So you can actually read this text any way you like and create your own poem as you weave your way through it. And it all is about remembering. And then this in black says, but forgetting is easy. Now here's one where the back turned out quite interesting, as you can see here. Minimalist, sort of like snow on a television screen. And that's because I absolutely lost it, that piece, and had to start all over again and added the whitewash to it and made this collage with these free forms and these strange things, which are starting to interest me, that look a little bit like human figures or letters or ancient symbols, petroglyphic symbols or something like that. We're coming close to the end. Recently, I have again started painting a bit. My wife says, stop calligraphy and start painting. I might need to do that. So this Inger Olsen, one of our students from Brody Online, was kind enough to send me this swan wing, which I then painted on this whitewash illegible document. And the colors I'm seeing on my screen are not as nice as they are here. There's a lot of warm, rich old pinks and ochres in it here, much more than what I'm seeing on my screen. And that gives you a sense of this idea that this wing is hanging on top of this document. It even has a little string and a nail that it hangs from here. We just have a couple more, and we've just gone up to the hour. Some feathers also that I painted on this one, hanging again from pins or tapes or things like that. So this temple idea interests me very much and is part of a long tradition, really, in manuscripts of making things appear to be on the page, giving them drop shadows and things like that. And with this, we come to the final one, something I did quite recently, which brings most of the elements together. The stamped letters here, the figural painting here, a bust of it's a Roman emperor, I suppose, in various guises, and calligraphy, which actually can be read. It's still within the realm of legible text, as you can just about see there. So you can see these are the elements that I've really pulled together. You don't see the layering of the Chinese papers here. You see the whitewash instead. But you can see how the text feeble, feverish, feral, fecund. So I had the F, and I did different things with the letter F, not necessarily hoping for a relationship between those four words. I let that take care of itself. And then what do you put after you've done feeble, feverish, feral, and fecund? How would you carry on with that sentence or those sentences? Well, the first thing was ideas. So now you have feeble ideas, feverish ideas, feral ideas, fecund ideas. That works for all of those. And then you have, I might have to go to the other side to read that. I can't read this one from over here, but this one says, dashed against the rocks. So feverish ideas dashed against the rocks, or feral ideas dashed against the rocks, driving you to acts of madness, filling your womb with youthful mistakes. So this is a poem that could be read at least 16 different ways, depending on how you take each block of text forward. And I find it interesting to construct that text with these busts. Oh, I did it again. I should just be able to do that, right? Nope. It's interesting to construct a text like that, see how it works in relation to the figures, and then write the other text, not necessarily worrying too much about how the ideas hang together, but they will, because they're all coming out of me or out of you at that moment, out of whatever it is that's that complex of ideas and emotions that's going on inside you at that moment. And so this collage process, which brings together these different elements, has really helped me to integrate all those different impulses, thoughts, the things I've learned and forgotten over the years into these works on paper. So I think, Karen, with that, we have come to the end of the portfolio.
We do have some questions, Brody, several questions. First of all, does your trilingual life help or confuse you?
Both, definitely. Oh, I love a multilingual life. And I find it fascinating and quite, oh, I should be standing up and looking there. I think the disadvantage of big countries is that you are often not encouraged to learn other languages. And I certainly wasn't growing up in Texas. It changed when I moved to Germany as an 8-year-old. My mother will remember all of that very much and sending me off to a German school. And within a few months, I was, speaking reasonable German. And that was one change that really brought a lot of opportunities with it through the years. And certainly when I learned Flemish, moving here, because I spoke German, Flemish was quite easy to learn. So one of the things that does, and I think any of you who are multilingual or even bilingual will know, is you start to look at the relationship between from one language to the next for a certain word. And you learn more about the meaning of the word in your own language when you see that it means something slightly different in another language. So I find that fascinating. And also, of course, you think about how you frame your ideas in one language rather than another, and would they be different in another language? So I believe that living in Belgium, which is officially a trilingual country plus English, the way language works is pretty much a standard thing to talk about. We joke about dialect. We imitate the accents of other people. Not politically correct anymore to do that, I suppose, but if it's the Dutch, it's all right. And and so they're quite alive to the nuances of language. And here in Bruges, we still have Bruges dialect, which my wife speaks very well. And they say funnier things in Bruges dialect than they would in proper Flemish. It's just dialects are very rich in long-term meaning, going way back into the history of the people. So all of that is a really good amniotic fluid for a calligrapher to grow in.
What a great description. Actually, the question was phrased as trilingual country, not trilingual life.
Right, yeah. Well, officially, I think officially trilingual, but then really English is everywhere. And then, but just to give you an example, my wife spoke Bruges dialect to her mother, but proper Flemish to our daughter, if you want your child properly educated, and English to me. So to the three closest members of her family, she'd turn in 3 directions and speak 3 things. We all understood all of it, but that was the natural language for each of those relationships. And that, that's fascinating. That wouldn't happen so quickly, I don't suppose, back home in Texas. Might these days.
So Brody, apropos language, Karen Barber is asking if there's a concern using paper with languages that you don't know and can't read, such as your Japanese.
I don't allow myself to be concerned. And I suppose you could say, well, okay, you have bits of Japanese in your collage. Wouldn't it make sense to make sure that those words were appropriate to the work you're creating? And yeah, that's a fair criticism, I think. But if I were to have to go off and either learn Japanese or find somebody to translate all these things so that I could get the right piece of paper at the right moment for that collage, I'd never be able to go forward. You know, it would just, what I want is that page as a symbol either of that language and culture or as a symbol of the many languages and cultures that are, as it were, represented in my collage by using different scripts. So it's not there for its specific language content. It's there to symbolize something.
So our last question for this evening for you, daytime for us, is right now, what is your focus? Is it commissions? Is it your own art?
Right now, the focus is preparing for the collage workshop in March and making sure that's as good as it can possibly be. I've discovered that the online teaching does take a lot of time to get right. I've prepared more for online than I ever did for live because I know that it wouldn't work well if there were a lot of confusing questions that they can't, you know, ask straight away as I'm standing there. So that's the main thing. But the other thing is, and besides finishing my book from Shaping Your Story so that I can present it also at the gala on the 27th, the other thing is really preparing myself for when I can get to the studio in Italy and really start to work and thinking. So I'm thinking, what material am I going to work on? Do I need to make a big shift in what I'm doing from paper to some other material? And I'd really like to move back into sculpture. I've only done a few, and I really enjoyed the process and found it very interesting to create sculptures on that you can write on or do sgraffito on, because it's not something that you find in the history of sculpture. You do in the most ancient times. The Egyptians did it, the Sumerians did it, the Greeks didn't do it anymore, the Middle Ages didn't do it, the Far East doesn't do it. I think in India you'll find examples, but generally speaking, text was for one surface and the human body was another surface. And so I think that that interests me very much to bring those two together. So I need a big place where I can get really messy to make those sculptures. And continuing with the collage is my project with these things is my box of 100. I think we talked about that once, Karen.
Right,
yeah,
you and I. Would you like to talk about it? It's a beautiful thing.
Well, it is. It's either that or it's vain and useless. But the idea would be to create, to make a box and put 100 pieces like I've shown you tonight, but only 100 that I really absolutely stand behind and want to leave behind. And I don't know what I'm going to do with that box, but that's a sort of a goal to say, okay, you know, when you work as many of you know, the work to commissions, and a lot of those commissions are commercial in nature rather than artistic in nature. And you watch the time go by when you think, oh, I should be making my art, but I'm earning my living. And so I've made as many works of art as I could over the years, but I really want to make more. And that idea of 100 that I approve of would be the sort of goal that I've set before myself.
Wow, that is a very lofty and beautiful idea.
The 100's not so many if you look at the body of work created by artists who did nothing else. You know, they'll have made thousands of things. So it's not, but I'm quite strict with what will go into the box of 100.
How many pieces would you say you showed today?
About 35 to 40.
Okay.
Maybe half would go in the box.
A couple of other questions have come up in the meantime. Have you sold any of your favorite works?
Yes. Lots. I mean, in fact, because all of this is quite recent, you know, I have made hundreds and hundreds of these things. And yeah, most of them are gone, sold over the years. Absolutely. It is painful, like sending your kids away, you know, watching them go off to college.
Yeah, I was going to ask if it's hard to part with them.
Sure, I'm sure any of you who sells a work that you're really satisfied with, I'm sure you find that a difficult parting.
And I would add, Brody, that when you say that your main focus right now has been on Brody Online, I can tell any of you who have not enrolled, and those of you who have enrolled know, Brody's handouts are so meticulous and step by step, and so much thought and effort went into them. You deserve a tremendous thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you. I've enjoyed making them. It's helped me to focus, all those thoughts that I've been teaching for 35 years or so, and finally get them absolutely in order and make sure that they make sense to the students. So it's been like, these 2 years have been like writing a huge book, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I have enormous notebooks, literally.
Mm-hmm. I think you must have by now 200, 250 pages or something.
Probably. Yeah. Well, Brody, there's a lot of thank yous in the chat.
Oh.
So, and from myself as well, thank you. It was beautiful.
Thank you very much for hosting, and thank you, Trish, for standing in too, and thank you, Peter, for the technical assistance. I thank all of you for coming this evening and looking over my shoulder, peek, peek, peek. And I hope you enjoyed it. And I look forward to seeing you joining us for the collage workshop. It's going to be a lot of fun, and you'll be doing some things that will surprise you. So I hope to see you in March, and thank you all very much.